The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty held a summit meeting on February to evaluate the region's political situation in the face of international far-right aggression. Ecuador is in its final week of electoral campaigning ahead of the general elections on February 9, 2025. And a Palestinian combatant from the resistance movement hit to death 2 Israeli soldiers and injured 6 others in response to the genocidal offensive mounted by Zionist forces on the northern occupied West Bank. Hello, welcome from the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, the 12th extraordinary summit of ALBA-TCP took place on Monday, and the participants defined several commitments to be carried out between the member countries of the alliance. During the summit, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, explained that thanks to the resources of the ALBA Bank, work is continuing on a mechanism for the purchase of planes and ships for the transport of products between countries in the region. In addition, he urged the work on the realization of Agro-ALBA for the production and agricultural exchange between countries. Meanwhile, insisted to evaluate the proposal of ALBA-TCP, which will be dedicated to exchange of fishery and aquaculture products. And during his opening address, the Venezuelan president highlighted the bloc's need to demonstrate its protagonist role in the struggle for sovereignty, dignity, and equality. In this context, the member countries of the alliance agreed to defend human rights of migrants and agreed to coordinate actions to demand respect for citizens who return to their countries of origin. In response, the leaders proposed the creation of a credit fund for an initial amount of $10 million for the protection of migrants. They also stressed the need to relaunch the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, while assuring that members of the alliance will have a research center on artificial intelligence to advance the scientific and technological development of the countries of the region.
The ALBA Bank is making a proposal, namely to create a system of loan for reinsertion of entrepreneurial migrants with a fund, according to this proposal, $10 million, a roving fund to address partially this situation.
On February 4, 1962, in Cuba took place the Second Declaration of Havana, which reaches this year its 63rd anniversary. That day, Commander and then Prime Minister Fidel Castro Ruz inaugurated the Second National General Assembly of the People, which would respond to the expulsion of Cuba from the Organization of American States. Fidel Castro unveiled the Second Havana Declaration, which expressed Cuba's position regarding the hostility of the United States, that the day before issued the Presidential Executive Order number 3447 that established the blockade of the largest of the Antilles. The Second Havana Declaration ratified the postulates of the first and condemned the breaking of diplomatic relations by the White House, reaffirming that Cuba's sovereignty is non-negotiable. Let's now take our first short break. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll always find news updates in different formats. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ecuador is in its final week of electoral campaigning ahead of the general elections on February 9, 2025. The 16 candidates for the presidential seat have intensified their campaign activities with the aim of attracting more voters throughout the country. For the moment, the candidate for the Citizens' Revolution, Luisa Gonzalez, and the current president, Daniel Noboa, lead the polls with a slight difference, which points to a possible ballotage. For its part, the National Electoral Council detailed that the electoral packages abroad were distributed in regions such as Europe, Oceania, and Asia. It also confirmed that some 100,000 security personnel will be deployed to guard the country's polling stations. Meanwhile, the Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa announced on Monday the militarization of ports and borders with the justification of preventing destabilization attempts of armed groups. The measure will be enforced from Saturday, February 8th to Monday, February 10th, which implies that the presidential elections will take place on February 9th under this presidential measure. For its part, the Constitutional Court declared unconstitutional on Monday the executive decrees with which Cynthia Gilbert was entrusted with the presidency. All in a context where 21 victims of forced disappearances in the hands of Ecuadorian armed forces have been reported, without the president having made any statement on the matter. And the United States and El Salvador announced on Monday the start of a controversial immigration agreement that they call unprecedented. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele on Monday. After a meeting, he said that El Salvador agreed to take in any irregular migrants from the United States and also offered to house dangerous U.S. criminals in its prisons. Bukele affirmed that the new agreement with the U.S. constitutes a unique case. He said that this is a much larger agreement that is unprecedented in the history of relations, not only between the U.S. and El Salvador, but with all of Latin America.
The President, in an act of extraordinary friendship to our country, knowing the challenges we face in the U.S., has agreed to the most unprecedented and extraordinary migratory agreement anywhere in the world. First, obviously, he continues with full cooperation on the returning of Salvadorians who find themselves illegally in the United States and welcome them back home, and that's already existing and that will continue. But second, he has agreed to accept for deportation any illegal alien in the United States who is a criminal from any nationality, be they MS-13 or Tren de Aragua, and house them in his jails. And third, he has offered to house in his jails dangerous American criminals in custody in our country, including those of U.S. citizenship and legal residence. No country's ever made an offer of friendship such as this.
And on Monday, the Haitian National Police, together with the Haitian Army, continued operations against gang members in the commune of Kenskov after 10 days of clashes. According to local media, despite the efforts of the police, the gangsters managed to move into the center of Kenskov. The commune authorities ordered police and military officers to remain deployed in the territory and urged them to reinforce measures against the gangsters. For his part, the commander-in-chief of the Haitian police, Ramon Normil, has held meetings in recent days with specialists to discuss new strategies to put an end to the violence in the region. Let's take a look at the number of victims so far of the violence in the Caribbean country. According to information verified by the United Nations Office for Human Rights, during the year 2024, 5,601 died as a result of attack by criminal groups. Also, 2,212 people were wounded, while 1,494 were kidnapped. In this regard, the International Organization for Migration reported that in just 1 year, the number of displaced people has tripled to 1.41 million people, more than half of whom are children. In Australia, heavy flooding caused devastation in communities in northern Queensland, the state premier said. Emergency crews carried out rescue operations during the floods, where heavy rains claimed the life of a woman, flooded homes, and caused widespread damage. Thousands of residents who were evacuated have returned to their homes, but are unaware of the condition of homes and businesses due to flooding and power outages caused by heavy rains. The Prime Minister, David Crisafulli, notified that some regions were hit by almost 2 meters of rain. However, he clarified that the weather conditions were mild in the last hours. The Japanese island of Hokkaido received a record amount of snow in the last hours due to a low-pressure system that threatens the Japanese coast. Japan's meteorological agency reported that the coldest front of the season is advancing towards territory. A low-pressure system still in motion and has caused the appearance of snow clouds in the Pacific coastal areas of Hokkaido and threatens with blizzards and in large areas of the coast of the Sea of Japan. About a meter of snow is estimated to fall in some areas of Hokuriku in 24 hours to Wednesday morning, with the possibility of heavy snowfall in the southwest and west of the archipelago, where it seldom snows. The cold front is expected to last about a week. We have now our second short break coming up. Remember, you can join us on our YouTube channel and see all the different special broadcasts that we have, our interviews and top stories. Hit the subscribe button and stay up to date on everything happening around the world. We'll be right back. Welcome back. A Palestinian combatant from the resistance movement hit to death 2 Israeli soldiers and injured 6 others in response to the genocidal offensive mounted by the Zionist forces on the northern occupied West Bank. Local media reported the clash broke out on Tuesday morning near the teleSUR checkpoint eastern Tuba city. Sources detail that the Palestinian combatant barricaded himself inside a watchtower at the checkpoint to wait for the right time to open fire, in which he was killed. Afterward, Israeli authorities ordered the closure of nearby roads and the dispatch of helicopters to transport the injured to hospitals. And the Israeli siege against the city of Jenin continues for the 15th consecutive day, leaving at least 25 people killed to date. Zionist forces blew up some 20 residential buildings in the eastern part of the Jenin camp in the occupied West Bank. Local authorities denounced that Tel Aviv is carrying out a campaign of forced displacement, which affects some 15,000 Palestinians. Authorities also warned that the occupation troops have no respect for international humanitarian law, since their attacks also targeted health centers and members of the press who were covering the news. And the Israeli occupation forces remain deployed at the Rafah border crossing to prevent the return of Palestinian citizens to the Gaza Strip. According to local authorities, Israel is not only preventing the return of citizens of Gaza to their homes, but is also blocking the departure of the wounded to medical centers and hospitals abroad where they would receive medical treatment. The restrictions of movement of the Palestinian population constitutes a violation of the ceasefire agreement reached between Israel and the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas, which entered into force on January 19th. And several Middle Eastern governments reject the U.S. president's proposal to relocate Palestinians from Gaza to neighboring countries. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Iran, Egypt, and Jordan condemn what they describe as an ethnic cleansing plan. In response to Trump's statements, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said that the transfer of Palestinians out of their territory is not the solution, and the establishment of a pre-Palestinian state recognized throughout the world must be promoted. For his part, Jordan's Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi stated that his country's stance against Trump's plans would remain firm and unwavering. And in South Korea, a constitutional court held a briefing as part of the ongoing impeachment trial against President Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon arrived at the court in a prison truck escorted by guard vehicles after being incarcerated in a detention center in Seoul since officers arrested him in January. The Constitutional Court is currently deliberating on his formal removal or reinstatement, a process that could take up to 180 days. Prosecutors indicated that the ousted president on rebellion charges in connection with his imposition of a short-lived martial law past December 3rd.
내란의 죄를 저질렀다면 그에
Yoon
합당한
has to be properly punished for committing a crime of rebellion, for the protection of the Constitution and judicial justice. We will do our best to bring a fair judgment in the impeachment trial for our citizens so they can rest easy at night.
편안하게 주무실 수 있도록 최선의 노력을 다하겠습니다.
In the United States, protests over recent raids and deportations carried out by Immigration Enforcement Services continued in Los Angeles, where demonstrators joined a national day of action. During the demonstrations, participants waved flags of several countries and carried signs demanding respect for the rights of immigrants. The protest is part of the so-called Day Without Immigrants, with the aim of making visible the struggle for immigration justice. Protesters gather at Los Angeles City Hall and schedule more activities throughout the day, including strikes and business closures in support of the cause. Demonstration takes place in a context of growing concern over the immigration policies of the Donald Trump administration, who has intensified raids and deportations in several cities across the country.
Who they are, what badge they carry, man. If you're gonna be lying, especially in front of the camera.
In an exclusive interview for our news multi-platform teleSUR, Raul Antonio Capote, Cuban journalist of the Grandman newspaper, highlighted that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, used the U.S. aid to finance terrorist projects of the Venezuelan opposition.
Que recuerden que Trump en su primer gobierno utilizó el USAID, se financió el USAID.
Remember that during his first administration Trump used the USAID, he financed the USAID, all the things that were done against Venezuela in those years were done with USAID funds. In other words, everything that was prepared against the Maduro government at that time came out of the pockets of the USAID. Now it is uncomfortable for him to use that organization, which is also in tremendous disrepute today, because it has also been linked to extremely corrupt elements of the Venezuelan opposition. USAID was the one that financed the entire Guaido project and everything that happened in those years, and has responsibility in many acts of corruption to which all these lords of the Venezuelan opposition are linked.
The Chinese government announced Tuesday that it will impose tariffs of 10 to 15% on certain U.S. products beginning February 10th, in response to the 10% tariffs on Chinese goods imposed by President Donald Trump. According to a statement issued by the Chinese Executive Customs Commission, Beijing will apply a 15% tariffs on coal and liquefied natural gas products and a 10% tariffs on crude oil, agricultural machinery, large cars, and pickup trucks. The same document adds that in the case of imported goods originated in the States, the corresponding duties will be applied based on the tariff rates in force. Finally, the Chinese government filed a complaint against the United States before the World Trade Organization for violating the rules established by the agency. We have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on our social medias, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.